The Indianapolis Colts cannot go a single week without giving Colts fans some degree of mental health issues or heart attacks. But this week, we ended up with the win, going 27-24. Now only one game back of the division title after 4 weeks. Now sitting at 2-2 after an abysmal start to the season, where the Colts looked basically dead. They now have 2 good weeks under their belts against 2 really good teams. But here's the thing that I want to point out before we're getting into the details of this video, because there's a couple players that I think need to be pointed out. They need to be emphasized. They need to be pushed. But before we get into that, the Colts have now a point differential of 0. They have allowed exactly the same amount of points as they've scored. Now, after the first 2 games of the season, I think that we would have all thought that point differential would be massive. But remember, they have yet to finish a game with more than a 1 score turnover or 1 score point differential. First game against the Texans was a 1 score. Second game against the Packers was a 1 score at 10-16. And then equally last week, going up against the Bears, a 1 score. And then today, even after going up 17-0, still finished the game with a 1 score point differential. And that's great and all when you're looking at 2-2, but when you're looking up against teams that could potentially be really, really deadly further on in the season, that 1 score is going to need to be bigger. But there's a lot of storylines to get into this game, so let's get into it. This is Elijah from Sports Talk Indy, where we cover all things Colts every single day. And today we are talking about this massive game, the massive win that the Colts got against the 3-0 Steelers. Early storylines are Anthony Richardson looked great the first drive. Shane Steichen drew up a massive play on the very beginning of the first drive of the first quarter, very first play of the game. That draws a deep crosser to Michael Pittman. And this puts Anthony Richardson in a solo field on deep balls completed. He now has over 6 at over 40 yards per completion, which is insane. When you look at Anthony Richardson's accuracy short, it's not good. In fact, it's abysmal. I would say that that's the biggest area that Anthony Richardson needs to improve, is being able to read defenses and furthermore, looking at these plays and being able to diagnose early. But as far as 40-plus yards, nobody does it better right now than Anthony Richardson. But big storyline, after going up 7-0, getting a 3-and-out, second drive of the game, Anthony Richardson goes out with a hip injury. Now, I do believe that play, there should have been some sort of penalty, but even more than that, Anthony Richardson's got to get down. He had more than enough opportunity to get down, to slide, and yet he didn't, and now we're looking at, again, a massive injury for Anthony Richardson. Hopefully he comes back next week, but what I do hope that we saw, or that he saw in this game, was the ability of Joe Flacco to dot up one of the best defenses in football. Again, Joe Flacco comes in, immediately throws enough and gets them with a touchdown to Josh Downs. Josh Downs looked fantastic in this game. Really, really excited to see what this guy is going to morph into as his career continues. So you look at that, and then Joe Flacco was able to continue to hold it down, basically, after going up to 17-0. That's when things started to shift. That is when you see the Steelers really come back and get within a score on every single drive, and then went point for point. So first quarter, Colts had 3. Second quarter, at halftime, it was 17-3. In the third quarter, that's when the Steelers really started picking it up. In fact, it was almost flip-flopped because in the third quarter, then the Steelers got 7, and then the fourth quarter, the Steelers put up 14 points. And the Colts put up no points in the third quarter and then 10 points in the fourth quarter. So it definitely seemed that the foot was let off the gas for the Indianapolis Colts, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again 1,000 times over. When playing the game of football, never let your foot off the gas. Now, obviously, you can be a little bit more conservative. You don't have to play like the game's on the line every single time, but when you let your foot off the gas, that is how you get situations like this, where the Steelers come within 3 points and honestly could have had it. But there's a couple of players that I want to highlight, both good and bad, for the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, one player on the Pittsburgh Steelers, Justin Fields, if he's able to clean up a couple of those mistakes, this game's done. Justin Fields looked fantastic on several plays and was able to handle what a battered offensive line that he has against a really good defensive line of the Indianapolis Colts, who were able to get pressure on him pretty substantially. And honestly, if it's anyone but Justin Fields or maybe Lamar Jackson, the Colts end up with like 6 or 7 sacks easy on this game. But let's highlight players on the Indianapolis Colts. Michael Pittman had a fantastic game, posting his 113 yards on only 6 receptions for an average of 18.8 yards per reception. Josh Downs looked fantastic at 8 and 82 for 10.2 and with a touchdown. Drew Ogletree came in, was able to get a touchdown, and then you saw Jonathan Taylor with 3 at 20. But here's where the player that I want to highlight the most, the player that deserves the most attention, the most praise. We talked about him last week. We've talked about him through the season. Jalen Jones. Jalen Jones, who had the reigning AFC Defensive Player of the Week, had an unbelievable game again today. Now, you look at the box score, you see 5 tackles. That's not that big of a deal. But what Jalen Jones was able to do was constantly be in the face of, more often than not, George Pickens, and was able to be step for step with him. And honestly, this linebacker of Jalen Jones looked fantastic, looked good today. But even more than that, Samuel Womack. You remember beginning of the season at roster cuts, the Colts added Samuel Womack from the waivers of the San Francisco 49ers. Samuel Womack had 3 or 4 really, really good plays, different pass deflections, and was able to be just limit what the Steelers were able to do. So you got those 2 guys. But now I think we need to focus on what might be a budding safety room of one of the better safety rooms in football. And I don't mean to overreact, and I don't mean to speak in hyperbole and go crazy, but Julian Blackmon and Nick Cross at this point in the season have got to be one of the more deadly defenses or more deadly safety rooms in football. Now remember, Julian Blackmon missed a game. Nick Cross had to fill in. Nick Cross is leading the league in tackles. Not only that, but he's a constant force to be reckoned with. And as soon as someone gets the ball, it is like a heat-seeking missile with Nick Cross on that football. And he's looked great. Looked fantastic. This is his first year starting and having a starting role in this defense. But not only that, but Julian Blackmon had another really, really good day. That's 2 weeks in a row that this safety room has looked, dare I say, elite. They've looked fantastic. I think those 2 guys deserve more credit than anyone else as far as what they were able to do in the pass defense. But not only that, but there until the last half of football, or there until the last quarter of football, the Colts' run defense looked again stellar against a really good rushing attack in Najee Harris, Justin Fields, and weirdly enough, Cordell Patterson looked really good at times. But this is a Colts defense that played enough, and I think that they're starting to get it. Now, don't get me wrong. This Colts defense allowing 24 points against the Pittsburgh Steelers will not fly. It's not going to work long term. But I think the pieces that you're starting to see, Leatu Latu had a good game. Tyquan Lewis had a good game. Taven Bryan weirdly had a decent enough game. Isaiah Land had that epic sack in the first quarter against Justin Fields that was unfortunately called back due to one of the most soft roughing the passer calls I've ever seen. But this Colts defense has some budding stars. Has some actual legitimate, really, really good football players that are starting to bud into their own, and I'm really, really excited to see. We'll cover more of this game as the week goes on, but initial reactions, obviously another heart attack of a game, but such a good game for the Indianapolis Colts to get back, and again, only 1 game back of the AFC South now, sitting at 2-2, beating the 3-0 Steelers.